My own daughter called me ugly, then slammed the door in my face. On the night I lost everything, I stood there in the rain holding a burned suitcase, wondering how the child I gave everything to could turn me away like a stranger. Welcome to her Fireside Stories. Wishing you a wonderful listening experience. I never imagined the word ugly would come from my daughter's lips, let alone aimed at me after every ounce of blood and sweat I'd poured into her future. But there I stood, shivering on her immaculate front porch, reeking of soot and desperation, as she casually tossed that dreadful insult in my face like it was nothing more than a stray remark. It was 3 in the morning, the night sky heavy with storm clouds, and my mind buzzed with disbelief. The glow of her porch light illuminated us in harsh clarity, making every crack in my dignity and every tear track on my cheek painfully visible. This was the same daughter for whom I sacrificed my youth, my finances, and my stability. Zara, with her dark, glossy bob that fell sharply to her chin, a haircut as polished as her carefully curated life. In that moment, all I could think was, how did we get here? I'm Amara Watson, Zara's mother, 56 years old. Short curly hair dyed warm chestnut to hide the grays in skin weathered by time, spent hustling between 2, sometimes 3 jobs. My hair doesn't gleam under city lights like hers, and my clothes certainly don't fit the refined aesthetic Zara demands of her visitors. Maybe that's why she called me ugly. Maybe it was the scent of burned dreams still clinging to my jacket from the accident that left me homeless. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe she just didn't have room for me physically or emotionally in her perfect porcelain life. After the words left her mouth, I felt my stomach twist. I remember stepping back, looking down at the battered suitcase in my hand, realizing I had nowhere else to go. My own daughter had turned me away. The door shut softly, yet it echoed like a gunshot in my ears. Zara's new husband, who I knew only through meticulously staged wedding photos on social media, didn't even bother to come to the door. Her house, perched in a gated community outside Charleston, seemed more like a fortress than a home. Black shutters, a pristine white fence, and a symmetrical garden of imported roses. Everything a reflection of Zara's desire for control, for flawlessness, for an aesthetic that evidently didn't include me. Fury and sorrow warred in my chest. I trudged away into the drizzling rain, heart pounding as I realized I had no safe haven left. That's how I ended up at a cheap motel off the interstate floor, sticky with God knows what, the stench of mildew burning my nose. Sitting on that faded bedspread, I vowed that if Zara wanted her pretty life so badly, she'd toss me aside and call me ugly. Then I'd make a move she never saw coming. I'd buy her dream house and put it up for sale, a testament to the love she'd shattered. Growing up, Zara was everything to me. She had a laugh that could brighten a whole room and thick wavy hair that she'd inherited from me, though she later straightened it into that sleek bob to fit in at her fancy new job. I was a single parent practically from the moment she was born. Her father, Connor, had parted ways when she was 10, leaving a foreclosure notice in one hand and a tear-stained note in the other. For years, it was just the two of us in a cramped apartment. I worked days as a cashier at a local grocery store and nights tending bar at a rundown place near the old shipyard. Our living arrangement was modest, but it was ours. I made sure Zara never went without a warm meal or a decent pair of shoes for school. If she needed a winter coat, I'd scrounge up extra shifts, or skip dinners, or skip rent, whatever it took. I stitched her Halloween costumes by hand and never missed a single parent-teacher conference, no matter how tired I was. I tried my hardest to raise her with a sense of compassion, of family, of gratitude for small blessings. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes I resented the weight on my shoulders, but I never let her see that she was smart, too. Earned top grades in high school, and landed a scholarship to a prestigious college. I still remember the day we drove her up to her first-year dorm. Her eyes brimmed with excitement. I had tears in mine, but I chalked them up to the wind. In that moment, I believed everything was worth it. The night spent hungry, the secondhand dresses, the exhaustion in my bones. She was the living proof of my struggles, but somewhere along the way, she found a new life that sparkled brighter, a life where I didn't fit. She landed a high-paying nutritionist gig at a cosmetic surgery clinic, started dating a well-off surgeon, and eventually married him in a ceremony so lavish I felt like an imposter. I tried to be happy for her, but my heart ached at how quickly she seemed to distance herself. I saw it in the way she avoided my calls and the tone of her texts, always short, always busy. I didn't blame her at first. I wanted her to live a life easier than mine. But I never thought she'd abandon me completely. When the fire took my rented cottage, an electrical fault sparking in the walls while I slept, I escaped with just the clothes on my back and a battered shoebox of documents. With no money to replace what was lost, I turned to Zara. I thought surely she'd let me crash in her guest room for a few nights. Instead, she let me stand on her porch in that pristine neighborhood, called me ugly, and told me to leave before I ruined her home's look. For the first time in years, I felt as though I was an intruder in my own daughter's life. My heart pounded as I tried to figure out what to do next. There was shame wrapped in anger, an odd cocktail that churned in my gut. At that motel, I cried the hardest I've ever cried. Ugly, chest-heaving sobs that made my throat hurt and my eyes burn. All I could think was, she's my only child. How can she be so cold? But that wave of grief gradually calcified into resolve. If Zara wanted me out of her life because I no longer fit her polished mold, I'd show her that this wasn't a one-way street. She had used me when it suited her, building the very foundation of her success on my back. The old me would have begged and forgiven, but the new me, raw and scorned, decided to flip the script. I had a small nest egg squirreled away, saved from side gigs, odd jobs, and a meager inheritance left behind by my late aunt. In the morning, I sat down at the squeaky motel desk, rummaged through that battered shoebox of documents, and pieced together every financial resource I had. That's when I remembered a conversation Zara and I had back when she was 15. We'd driven by a majestic southern home with a wide porch wrapped around it like a warm hug. Zara had pointed to the symmetrical pillars and said, "Mama, one day, I'm gonna live in a place like that." I chuckled, then patting her head, promising that dreams come true for those who keep working. Now, ironically, that memory became my weapon. I found a listing for an eerily similar home. Columns porch swing, a large lawn dotted with jasmine bushes. The place screamed southern grandeur. It was pricier than anything I'd ever considered, but the listing was old and the owner seemed desperate to sell. With the last of my nerve, I made an offer. They accepted, and before sunrise the next day, I slapped a for sale sign right there on the property I'd purchased free and clear. Then, with a trembling finger, I texted Zara a single photo of the house, her dream house and nothing else. A minute later, the phone rang. Her tone was as crisp as starched linen. "What is this?" she demanded. "Why are you sending me pictures of that house?" I took a slow breath, steadying my voice. "Because I bought it, and I'm putting it on the market. Hope it fits your aesthetic." I hung up before she could say another word. It was petty, yes, but it felt good. But even that small win felt hollow. By the time dawn broke, my motel room walls seemed to shrink in on me, suffocating me with second thoughts. Did I truly want revenge on my own daughter? Or was this a cry for acknowledgement that she'd hurt me beyond measure? Sighing, I decided to get out of that claustrophobic space. I slipped into yesterday's wrinkled clothes and wandered the city, eventually ending up in a neighborhood called Riverbend Heights, an old stomping ground of mine in my youth. That's where I ran into Carlene, my former neighbor, and a longtime friend. Carlene was known for her bright personality and even brighter hair. She used to have a voluminous brown perm, but now she'd embraced her silver locks in a neat pixie cut that suited her spunky energy. She lived in the same single-story craftsman she inherited from her parents, just a few blocks away from the local diner where I once worked. When I saw her, she was standing on her front porch in worn slippers, watering potted sunflowers. The squeal she let out upon recognizing me was loud enough to scatter the local pigeons. We hugged and she asked me point blank why I looked like I'd been dragged by a truck of regrets. That's Carlene for you, never one to mince words. So I told her everything: the fire, the porch, rejection. Zara's stinging words. Carlene's expressive face darkened with fury. She waved her watering can around, dramatically, droplets splashing on the concrete. That girl of yours always had a perfectionist streak, but kicking you out like that, unforgivable. She set the can aside, guided me into her living room, and insisted on making me sweet tea, the old-fashioned way. We talked for hours, and she reminded me how I'd once been unstoppable, a woman who could handle anything life threw at her. You haven't lost that spark. You just buried it under heartbreak, she said, patting my hand. Don't let your daughter's cruelty define you. We touched on the house I'd just bought, how I texted Zara the photo. Carlene let out a whoop, half admiration and half disbelief. Oh, honey, you're playing with fire now. But if that's what it takes for her to see what she's done, then so be it. That evening, I returned to the newly purchased property to collect my thoughts. The house stood atop a gentle slope framed by ancient oak trees, draped with moss that gave the entire place a wistful elegance. The porch's wooden planks creaked under my steps, a whispered greeting from a structure that had sheltered countless lives before I came along. I tried to picture Zara swanning across these immaculate floors in her designer heels, or hosting dinner parties with fancy hors d'oeuvres, smiling as if everything were perfect. My stomach churned with conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to hand her the keys, see her face light up, and watch as we formed memories here that would eclipse our painful history. But a larger part of me, a wounded, stubborn part, wanted to flip the script to say, "You threw me out, so I'm throwing out your dreams." That night, I slept on an inflatable mattress in the front room, the windows wide open to let in the night air. Charleston's humidity weighed thick around me, but the chorus of cicadas and crickets was oddly comforting, like nature's lullaby. For the first time since the fire, I felt a small glimmer of safety. This was mine after all, not a motel room or a cramped rental mine, but my sense of security wavered the moment I heard footsteps on the porch. My heart rattled in my chest. I grabbed a flashlight, flicked it on, and tiptoed toward the front door. Silhouetted against the moonlight was Zara, her figure still uncertain. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She was the first to break the tension. "Mom," she said, voice trembling, "can we talk?" I stared at her without invitation. Her once sleek bob was tied into a low ponytail, a single stray lock brushing her cheek. She looked different, less polished. She asked if she could come inside, and although my pride screamed no, I opened the door. We settled in the front room, sitting on two dusty chairs left by the previous owners. The silence hung in the air like an unasked question. Zara cleared her throat and gazed around at the high ceilings and bare walls. "So you really bought this place?" she said quietly. I nodded, arms folded. She pressed her palms together, a nervous habit from childhood. "I don't know where to start, Mom. I'm sorry for how I acted, but you caught me off guard." "And you?" She trailed off, averting her eyes. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I what? How exactly did I push you to say those words to me?" My tone was sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. She flinched, shaking her head. "It's not that you pushed me. My life is complicated. I have certain standards for how things should look and feel. When I saw you on the porch, your clothes smelling like smoke, your hair unkempt, I felt this panic, like everything was out of place, and I said something horrible. My eyes burned with tears. I refused to shed. Ugly, I whispered. You called me ugly, Zara. I've lived my whole life trying to protect you from feeling worthless, and you threw that word at me without a second thought. She pressed her face into her hands. I know, and I can't take it back, but I want to try to make it right. Before I could respond, there was a sound from the driveway. Zara's husband, a tall man with meticulously styled hair, had arrived. He took one look at our tense exchange and quickly suggested they leave. She rose to follow him but paused in the doorway. I shouldn't have rejected you, Mom. If there's a way we can fix this, please tell me. Then she left, leaving me alone with the echoes of her words. I felt torn between anger and a desperate longing for reconciliation. I glanced around at the house, the battered walls, the dusty floors, and realized there was far more to fix here than just old paint. Maybe the best place to start rebuilding was right where everything had broken down, with honesty, with tears, and with an acknowledgement of what we'd both lost. In the days that followed, I wrestled with guilt as much as I did with anger. A part of me wanted to tear that for sale sign out of the lawn, march to Zara's doorstep, and offer a truce. Another part of me seethed at the memory of her wrinkled nose, her disapproving gaze. Neither emotion gave me peace. I turned to an unexpected refuge, the dusty old attic in this grand house. Its rickety ladder groaned beneath my weight each time I climbed up there, with boxes of salvaged belongings from my trunk. Among the items I'd saved from the fire was an old photo album, corners charred but the pictures mostly intact. Those images brought me back to simpler times, Zara's 8th birthday, where she insisted on a unicorn cake even though it was way beyond my budget. Her high school choir concert where she wore her hair in 2 puffy pigtails before she discovered straightening irons. One morning, while I was flipping through these snapshots, I found an unopened envelope tucked between the album pages. My heart jolted. The handwriting on the front read, "To Amara from Connor." Zara's father had sent this letter years after he left. I'd tucked it away, never having the courage to read it thoroughly. But now curiosity overcame me. Inside was an apology raw and rambling. He wrote about how he had found solace in a new town, how he discovered a faith he never had before, how he wanted to see Zara but didn't know if he deserved to. I read it 3 times each pass, stirring a different emotion. Frustration, regret, pity. I'd always assumed Connor had washed his hands of us without a backward glance, but it turned out he'd tried to reconnect, and somehow that message got lost. Had Zara known? Would it have changed anything if I'd reached out to him? I mulled over these questions until the sun dipped below the attic window. Then a more pressing thought intruded. Zara must have known at some point because Connor wrote he'd visited, so she had withheld this. Why? My chest tightened. Could it be that in her own twisted way, Zara was trying to protect me from the man who'd hurt us both? Or was she punishing him? Punishing me? Punishing all of us with silence? I stepped outside for air, the attic's musty smell clinging to my hair and clothes. The sun was warm on my face, and I saw Carlene waving from her old pickup truck in the driveway. She had come by to drop off a spare mattress, something for me to sleep on, rather than the deflated inflatable that gave me a backache. Carlene hopped out of the truck, dusted her jeans, and gave me a grin. "You look like you've been wrestling ghosts up there." "I have," I replied, managing a half smile. As we lugged the mattress inside, I filled her in on the letter from Connor. It's so strange realizing my entire perspective on him might be wrong. "Maybe he did care," Carlene scoffed. "Well, caring doesn't erase the years he left you hanging, but it's a piece of the puzzle. Doesn't surprise me that your girl might have blocked him. She always did run hot and cold, that one." She had a point. When Zara was little, she was fiercely loyal. If she perceived someone wronged me, she'd cut them out of her life entirely. That loyalty made me proud, though sometimes it was misguided. Now seeing how that trait had grown, I wondered if her old protective streak had turned into the very cruelty that drove her to reject me on her porch. We carried the mattress to the spare bedroom at the end of the hallway. The battered floors echoed with our footsteps, making the house feel cavernous and lonely. As we set the mattress down, Carlene looked around, her expression thoughtful. This place has good bones, you know. Big rooms, strong foundation. You could do something meaningful with it. Her words sparked a flicker of inspiration. The last few nights, I'd been waking up at odd hours, thinking about how I'd never truly had a stable home. I'd always rented or crashed somewhere. Even with Zara, it felt like I was on borrowed time. There was a deeper hunger in me now, a yearning to build something lasting not just for me, but for others in need. Before I could dwell too deeply on that thought, a sharp knock rattled the front door. Carlene and I exchanged looks, then made our way down. When I opened it, there stood Zara, visibly distressed. Her once flawless bob was haphazardly pinned back, and mascara smudged the edges of her eyes. She looked so unlike her usual polished self that I nearly didn't recognize her. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, glancing at Carlene with a polite but terse nod. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her voice tight with urgency. I led her into the living room, the three of us settling on mismatched chairs. Zara inhaled shakily. "I came to tell you that Dad Connor wrote to me after he left. He asked to come back. I refused. I told him we didn't need him. I wanted to protect you from more disappointment." My eyes flicked to Carlene, who pressed her lips into a thin line but said nothing. I could feel my pulse throbbing in my temples. "So you decided on my behalf that I didn't get to talk to my own husband." Tears welled in Zara's eyes, and she wrapped her arms around herself. "I was 16 and terrified. I saw how hard you struggled, how you cried at night when you thought I was asleep. I thought it'd be better for you to hate him than to let him back in and risk being hurt again." Carlene cleared her throat gently. "Girl, you can't just go making decisions like that and expect no fallout." Zara's gaze dropped. "I know that now, but it's too late. Dad's gone. He died a year ago. I found out through some old contact of his, and I realized I've been carrying that weight alone." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Mom." A swirl of conflicting feelings rose in me: anger at her audacity, pity for her fear, sorrow for the father Zara would never fully know again, and a strange relief that at least the secrets were out. I pressed my palm to my forehead. "This changes a lot," I muttered, unsure whether it was a revelation or a heartbreak. Please share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I took a week to process this new tangle of truths. During that time, Zara called multiple times, but I only responded once, merely to say I needed space. She seemed to understand. Carlene checked on me every couple of days, bringing the comfort of fresh donuts and an ear to listen. Together, we explored the dusty corners of this house, discovering old trunks, forgotten trinkets, and peeling wallpaper. It was during one of these explorations that an idea began to form in my mind, like a sprout pushing through concrete. We were in the second-floor bedroom, which overlooked a patch of marshland at the property's edge. The entire room smelled faintly of lavender, probably from an old sachet left by a previous owner. I wandered to the wide window, taking in the golden light of late afternoon. "You know," I said quietly, "Zara's not the only one who's ever made me feel like I don't belong. This world does that to a lot of us women, especially when we get older or broken or worn." Carlene nodded, folding her arms. "True enough, folks think once you're past your prime, you're useless, or at least better kept out of sight. That's when my earlier flicker of inspiration returned, a little brighter this time. What if this house became more than a symbol of revenge? What if it could be a haven for women who don't fit anywhere else?" Carlene stared at me, eyes widening, "Like a shelter or a transitional home." I shrugged. "Maybe I could fix it up, get the necessary permits. There's a huge need for places where older women or women down on their luck can find a fresh start without feeling like charity cases." She lit up, snapping her fingers. You could call it something hopeful like Harbor House or Rose Haven. A rush of excitement and uncertainty made my palms tingle. Could I really do that? Did I have the resources, the stamina, the nerve? My little nest egg plus the property itself might be enough for a modest start, but it would also mean letting go of that petty notion of using the house to jab at Zara. I'd have to decide whether my mission was to build or to break. That very night, unable to sleep, I made a list in the margin of an old notepad. I scrawled out every potential step, contacting city officials, exploring nonprofit registration, finding volunteers halfway through. I had to laugh at myself. Just weeks ago, I was sobbing in a motel, my life in ruins. Now here I was dreaming of building a sanctuary for people in need. The distance between the two extremes amazed me. But dreams aren't enough to make things happen. I needed a plan. The following morning, I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my limited contacts. One name stood out, an old colleague from my bartending days, Naomi, who had gone on to work in social services. We hadn't spoken in ages, but I hoped she'd remember me fondly enough to answer. To my relief, she did. She sounded genuinely happy to hear from me, and when I explained my idea, her enthusiasm was contagious. Amara, this is so needed. Women over a certain age often have nowhere to go if they lose jobs or family support. Let's meet up and talk details. We arranged a meeting at a nearby cafe, and I walked there with a knot of nervous excitement in my stomach. Naomi arrived in a flutter of floral skirts, her braided bun bobbing with each step. We hugged, and she immediately launched into a rundown of the bureaucratic hoops I'd need to jump through. But don't worry, she said, sipping her latte. I can help you with grants referrals, even connecting you with local churches or philanthropic groups that might donate. My mind buzzed with possibilities. Then her tone grew serious. This won't be easy, Amara. You have to be committed. People may try to take advantage, and funding can dry up if you're not careful. I swallowed. I understand, but I have to do this. In that moment, I felt an odd sense of purpose take root inside me, deeper than any fleeting vengeance I had once sought against Zara. Maybe the greatest way to reclaim my self-worth and show Zara what real values look like was to build a place of belonging for those society discarded. A week of frenzied preparations followed. I juggled phone calls to the local zoning board, hammered out a preliminary budget with Naomi, and sketched out renovation plans in a spiral notebook. During my breaks, I tore down old wallpaper in the living areas, discovering layers of paint in pastel blues and greens from decades past. Each revealed color felt like unearthing a hidden history, forgotten stories of families who once roamed these halls. One afternoon, I took a break on the porch swing, sipping iced tea while the humid air pressed in. That's when Zara pulled up in her sleek sedan, stepping out with a hesitant expression. She wore a simple ponytail and loose linen pants, so different from her usual crisp dresses, and looked nervous as she approached. I heard you're planning something big here, she said, swallowing hard. Carlene mentioned you might be opening a transitional home. Is that true? I nodded, bracing myself. Yes, I'm calling it Rose Harbor, a place for women who need a second chance. Why do you ask? She stared out at the lawn, her eyes distant. Because I'd like to help if you'll let me, my heart constricted. This was the daughter who once mocked my appearance and turned me away. Yet her voice sounded sincere. Help, how? Zara exhaled slowly. I've got connections through my clinic people who might donate supplies, medical checkups, even small grants. And she hesitated. I can contribute some money myself. I've been setting aside savings with my husband. We believe in philanthropy. A rush of conflicting emotions flooded me. Gratitude, suspicion, hope. I recalled the letter from Connor, the secrets she kept. Trust was fragile, but I also remembered that unwavering love I once had for my little girl, the unstoppable bond only a mother and child share. Finally, I took a leap of faith. All right, I said, standing up. Show me you're serious. Over the next month, Zara did exactly that. She showed me she was serious. She tapped into her network at the clinic, arranged for a few pro bono consultations for older women who might need help managing chronic conditions, and even convinced a local interior design shop to donate paint and furniture. We spent countless evenings together in these echoing rooms, painting walls a soothing shade of cream, lugging in second-hand armchairs, and transforming neglected spaces into something resembling warmth and dignity. It wasn't all smooth sailing. We argued over color choices. I favored calm blues and greens, while Zara gravitated toward a more contemporary palette. She insisted on using top-of-the-line fixtures for the bathrooms. People deserve the best even if they've had a rough time, she argued. I worried about costs. Naomi played mediator, reminding us this was about more than aesthetic appeal. Sometimes in the middle of the day, I'd catch Zara lost in thought, staring out a window with her lower lip caught between her teeth. I wanted to ask if she was thinking about Connor or about the guilt she'd carried, but I never found the right words. Then one rainy afternoon, as we unpacked boxes of donated blankets, she blurted out, "Mom, about Dad. I'm so sorry I kept you two apart. I know you might never forgive me, but I can't move forward without telling you that I paused a fleece blanket in my hand. Heart thrumming, I do forgive you, Zara," I said softly, "but the past still hurts. We'll have to work on trust again." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. The next moment, she buried her face in the blanket, using it as a shield to hide her sobs. I set aside my own pride and comforted her. For the first time since she was a teenager, I felt that motherly instinct flare up. My girl needs me. That was the day I began to see her less as my betrayer and more as a wounded soul trying to right her wrongs. Maybe we were both wounded, both needing the grace we were attempting to give others. As renovations chugged along, the house came alive with activity. Hammering and drilling rang out from dawn to dusk, thanks to volunteers from a local carpentry guild who believed in our cause. Occasionally, Carlene would drop by with fresh lemonade, cackling at the transformation. Naomi bounced in and out carrying legal forms that needed signing, always exuding that eager energy. During a break, I found myself in a newly painted bedroom on the second floor, the one with the best view of the marsh. I decided this would be a quiet retreat for residents who needed extra rest, a space to heal. Zara joined me, her footsteps light on the freshly polished floor. She wore paint-splattered overalls, her bob tucked under a pastel bandana. A pink streak of paint decorated her cheek. "It's almost peaceful here, isn't it?" she said, gazing out the window at the late afternoon sun sparkling on the water. I nodded, peaceful and full of potential. She turned to me, crossing her arms. "I've been talking to my husband. We've decided to donate a chunk of our personal savings so we can open up 2 more bedrooms. We'd also like to sponsor a small medical suite, just a room with basic equipment. For checkups and physical therapy, maybe." Her words stunned me. In that moment, I saw the best version of Zara, the compassionate child who once spent her allowance buying me a Mother's Day card when she was 8. She'd grown into a woman who could be just as generous if she chose. Stepping closer, I placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm proud of you," I murmured, letting the tears in my eyes speak the rest. She gave a watery smile, and for once there was no tension between us, only understanding. Perhaps all the heartbreak had led us to a place where we could truly begin again. The thought warmed me even as the faint thunder of an approaching storm rolled in the distance. Just as we hit our stride, fate decided to test us again. Word began to spread about Rose Harbor through local social media channels, mostly positive buzz, but also some skeptics. One day, as I was sorting through donated clothes in the foyer, a stern-faced woman walked in uninvited. She was from the neighborhood's homeowners association, brandishing a folder of regulations. "You're Amara Watson. she snapped, adjusting her tight chignon of frosted blonde hair. I nodded warily. She flipped open her folder and rattled off a list of concerns. Increased traffic, the potential for undesirable elements, property value implications. My blood boiled at her dismissive tone. This was exactly the attitude that made me feel so unwelcome when I needed help. I took a steadying breath before responding. Ma'am, we're going through all the proper channels. We have permits in progress and will uphold community standards. These women are not undesirable. They're humans who need help. Her lips thinned. We'll be watching. Just remember that if you violate any codes, we have the power to shut this down. She turned on her heel and stalked out, leaving me shaking with a mix of anger and dread. When Zara arrived home later, I told her everything. Her eyes flashed with indignation. They want to keep out anything that doesn't look perfect. Sound familiar, she said bitterly. We spent the evening drafting letters collecting testimonies from prospective residents and preparing for any legal challenge. Zara's husband even offered to connect us with a lawyer friend. For a moment, I couldn't help but chuckle at the irony. The daughter who once valued appearances above all else was now defending a home for society's undesirables. The transformation in her heart wasn't just surface level, it was deep and real. We were a united front ready to do whatever it took to protect Rose Harbor. Still, fear gnawed at me. What if the Homeowners Association found a loophole or some petty violation? I'd poured my soul into this place, pinned my redemption on it. Could I endure another loss if they shut us down? Despite the threats, we pushed forward. The day of our soft opening arrived a modest ribbon-cutting ceremony in the front yard with folding chairs borrowed from a local church and a plastic table set for refreshments. Naomi gave a small speech about the mission of Rose Harbor, her braided bun practically bouncing with excitement. I stood beside her, a tight knot of nerves in my stomach. Zara was nearby fiddling with her phone to start a live stream of the event. A handful of curious onlookers from the neighborhood stood at a wary distance, their arms folded or their faces set in skepticism. Carlene was front and center, though clapping enthusiastically, when we finally cut the ribbon with a giant pair of scissors borrowed from the city council. After the ceremony, people trickled inside for a tour. Some faces lit up as they saw the homely but welcoming decor, simple quilts on the beds, fresh paint on the walls, secondhand couches arranged in cozy conversation nooks. Others remained stoic, pursing their lips like they were searching for a flaw. As the crowd thinned, a timid older woman lingered in the hallway, her frail hands trembling as she clutched a small purse. I approached gently. Welcome to Rose Harbor. Can I help you with something? She looked up, eyes watery. I'm Nora. I heard you might have a room for someone like me. Her voice faltered. My son, he doesn't want me living with him anymore. Says I'm a burden. I don't have anywhere else. In that instant, everything crystallized. This was exactly why we built Rose Harbor, for the Noras of the world, for every woman cast aside like they had no more value. Heart pounding with empathy and a sense of calling, I patted her shoulder. We have a room available, Nora. Let's see if it's a good fit. I showed her around from the sunlit dining area to the quiet reading nook upstairs. By the time we reached the bedroom near the window with the view of the marsh, tears shimmered in her eyes. She murmured, This is more than I hoped for." Our first resident, Nora, moved in that very evening. It felt surreal, like a dream that had burst into vivid reality. Zara and I helped her settle in, fluffing pillows and placing a vase of pink camellias on the nightstand. She couldn't stop thanking us, and I couldn't stop feeling grateful that my heart still had the capacity to care. Not long after, other stories found their way to us. A widow named Bernice, who had lost her retirement savings to a scammer and was sleeping in her car. A soft-spoken woman named June, whose children had been too busy with their own lives to notice. She was barely making rent on a crumbling studio apartment. Each one showed up at our door with a worn suitcase of belongings and a heavier suitcase of heartbreak. And each time we opened the door wide, determined to prove they weren't worthless or forgotten. Zara blossomed in this environment. Ironic considering how much she'd once cared about everything looking polished. She took over the day-to-day administrative tasks, her bobbed hair tucked behind her ears as she pored over spreadsheets. She even organized little social gatherings, game nights, potluck dinners, mornings with gentle yoga in the living room. Watching her be so hands-on filled me with pride and a bittersweet longing for what might have been if we'd understood each other earlier. Meanwhile, the threat from the Homeowners Association still loomed, but their initial fiery visits cooled to watchful waiting. Perhaps it helped that we were careful about noise levels, that our residents were polite and quiet, that we kept the garden tidy. Or perhaps some of them saw the good we were doing. Whatever the reason, no new complaint had been filed for now. Late one evening after Zara left for the night, I wandered into our little makeshift office and found a letter slipped under the door. It was from a lawyer representing the estate of Connor Watson, my ex-husband. My stomach lurched. I tore it open with trembling fingers. The letter stated that Connor had left a small life insurance policy, naming me as the beneficiary. That was shocking enough, but the letter also said he requested a portion be directed to any charitable endeavor close to Amara's heart. Please share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I sank into the office chair, tears slipping down my cheeks as I reread the letter. Connor, the man who vanished and left us struggling, had apparently carried the hope of returning. In some corner of his soul, he'd never stopped caring, or at least never stopped regretting. If only Zara and I had known that earlier, maybe we could have found some resolution before his death. But maybe this was his final gift, a chance to heal wounds in a way that words never could. I wasted no time calling the number on the letter the next day, speaking to the lawyer who confirmed the policy was legitimate. The sum wasn't massive, but it was more than enough to cover expansions at Rose Harbor, new bathrooms, a larger kitchen, or maybe even a small clinic wing. That afternoon, I asked Zara to meet me at the house. We sat in the newly refurbished living room, the walls painted a soft teal throw pillows, crocheted by volunteers scattered around us. When I showed her the letter, she stared in disbelief. Dad really did this. I nodded, fighting the sting in my eyes. She slowly brushed a hand across her cheek. He must have known somehow that we'd find a way to help others. A quiet moment passed between us. I reached for her hand and she let me hold it. Maybe it's time we stop blaming ourselves and each other for the past. He's gone. Let's honor his memory by using this money to make Rose Harbor even better. Zara squeezed my hand. That's what he'd want. The next few days felt like a whirlwind of plans and possibilities. We could expand the dining area to accommodate more residents or create a small library for those who had nowhere else to escape. Perhaps we'd install a greenhouse in the backyard, allowing the women to grow their own flowers and produce. The excitement drew everyone in. Naomi started drafting grant proposals to match Connor's fund, and Carlene called around to gather more volunteers. Even the residents like Nora and Bernice chimed in with ideas. It was as though the house itself radiated hope. Weeks slipped by, and each day I awoke feeling like I had more purpose than I'd ever known. Gone were the nights of sleeping in a dingy motel or crying in secret. Here I woke to the gentle hum of women chatting in the kitchen, to the smell of coffee brewing and fresh bread warming in the oven. It felt like a dream. I never knew I had to be surrounded by a community I helped build one crisp morning. As a mild autumn breeze fluttered through the curtains, Zara surprised me with a gift. It was a framed collage of photographs, some from her childhood and some new snapshots of Rose Harbor's transformations. There we were painting walls side by side, smiling at the camera with flecks of paint all over our clothes and faces. In another photo, we stood at the front door, arms around each other, beaming as a new resident stepped over the threshold. Tears sprang to my eyes. I looked at Zara, who was dressed casually in jeans and a loose shirt, her bob now grown out into a shoulder-length style with subtle highlights. She looked more relaxed, more real. "I wanted to give you something that shows how far we've come," she said softly. Clutching the frame to my chest, I managed a wobbly smile. "Thank you. It's perfect." We hung the collage in the foyer, where every resident, volunteer, and visitor could see it. Underneath, Zara placed a small plaque. "Home is where second chances grow." I traced the letters with my fingertips, feeling a surge of pride. Around midday, a black SUV pulled up in front of the house. Out stepped a woman from the city's Department of Community Services. She wore a crisp blazer and carried a manila folder under her arm. My pulse quickened. Had the Homeowners Association made another move? But to my relief, she greeted me with a warm smile. "Ms. Watson, we've reviewed your paperwork. Congratulations. Rose Harbor is now an officially recognized transitional living nonprofit." I nearly collapsed with gratitude, tears brimming in my eyes as Zara came rushing over. The official handed us the certificate, praising our dedication. It's not often we see a place this well organized, especially so quickly. "Keep up the good work." Being officially recognized meant more than just a piece of paper. It unlocked doors to grants, partnerships, and city resources. It also cemented our responsibility to keep Rose Harbor thriving. Over the following weeks, we got a steady trickle of new residents, each with a story of heartbreak or displacement. One woman, Helen, had been a music teacher for 30 years until she slipped on ice, broke her hip, and lost her job. Another, Jackie, was an immigrant widow whose children moved overseas, leaving her penniless. Every new arrival made me realize how society so easily dismisses those it deems past their prime. But here, under our roof, they found a place to be seen, to laugh, to remember they still had worth. Helen, for instance, asked if she could give piano lessons. We didn't own a piano, but Carlene pulled strings at a local church, and within days we had a donated upright piano in the living room. Soon the house was filled with the soft strains of classical music. Despite the growing sense of accomplishment, a quiet uncertainty gnawed at me late at night. Would Zara and I ever truly heal? We'd improved leaps and bounds, sure, but there was still a delicate tension whenever we brought up the past. That tension came to a head one evening while we were sorting through Connor's belongings that the lawyer had sent. There were old photos, letters, and even a worn journal he'd kept. Zara picked up the journal, flipping through the scribbled pages with trembling fingers. "He wrote about you a lot, Mom," she whispered, "about how he wished he'd come back, how he was proud of me even if he couldn't be in my life." My throat tightened, sitting beside her on the sofa. I draped an arm over her shoulder. "Do you think we can forgive him?" I asked softly. Her eyes flickered with pain. "I think so. I just wish I had more time to let him see that She paused, swallowing hard. "That I'm not a monster for shutting him out?" I gently squeezed her hand. "We've both got regrets, Zara. But it seems he wanted to leave something good behind for us. Maybe that's enough." That night, as the house lay quiet with everyone asleep, I couldn't settle. I crept to the kitchen and poured myself a mug of chamomile tea, sipping it slowly by the window. My reflection in the glass looked different. Older, yes, but somehow softer around the eyes. Gone was the constant worry, replaced by a certain peace. Then a realization struck me. I hadn't once considered leaving Rose Harbor. I'd always been transient, bouncing from one rented place to another, always at the mercy of finances or relationships. Now I had roots. This was the home. I'd never truly had a place where I belonged, just as much as anyone else. Even if I didn't share a last name with the other residents, even if we weren't related by blood, we were building something akin to family. There was one more piece of closure I needed. I retrieved the letter from Connor's lawyer, the one specifying how the insurance money was to be used, and I reread his handwritten note. In it, he apologized not just for leaving, but for missing all the important moments: Zara's high school graduation, her college acceptance, her wedding day. But the line that stood out was this: I hope you find it in your heart to forgive me, even if I never earned that forgiveness in person. The guilt I'd carried for years, the resentment, the confusion seemed to lift. I couldn't say I forgave him entirely yet, but I was willing to try. Maybe that was enough for now. I placed the letter back into its envelope, feeling a small spark of resolution. Tomorrow, I'd talk to Zara about adding a small plaque in Connor's name somewhere in the house. Not to glorify him, but to acknowledge that even flawed people can leave a legacy of hope. Morning arrived with a drizzle of rain pattering softly on the rooftop. I woke to find Zara already bustling in the kitchen, flipping pancakes alongside Nora, who insisted on helping. Helen's piano music floated gently from the living room as she practiced scales with June, who found comfort in pressing the keys. The scene warmed my heart, making me feel more at peace than I'd been in decades. Over breakfast, Zara and I exchanged a glance. "We need to talk," she said softly, nodding toward the sunroom where we could have privacy. I followed, sipping my coffee with a tinge of apprehension. As we settled into two old wicker chairs, Zara took a deep breath. "I know I can't erase the pain I caused by calling you ugly or how I left you standing on that porch, but I want you to know that I see you, Mom. I see how strong you are, how beautiful your spirit is. I was afraid of letting any imperfection into my world, but now I realize my world was empty without you." My eyes misted. I set down my coffee and reached for her hand. "Zara, hearing you say that means more to me than you know, but I need you to understand something too. I'm not perfect. I carry my own wounds, like believing I failed as a mother. Every time you pulled away, we need to keep talking to be honest with each other." She nodded vigorously, tears slipping down her cheeks. We hugged, and it felt genuine, unburdened by the tension of the past. It wasn't a fairy tale moment of instant healing, but it was a start, a real start. Then, just as we pulled apart, the doorbell chimed. Naomi walked in with a broad grin, brandishing an official-looking envelope. "You've got to see this," she announced. Inside was an approval letter for a sizable grant that would fund the construction of an additional wing, complete with private baths and a small nurse's station. Zara and I looked at each other in astonishment. Then we whooped with joy. The dream that had once been a shaky idea was blossoming into something much bigger than any of us had imagined. Construction on the new wing began in earnest. Hard hats, power tools, and planning sessions took over our lives. Every time I stepped outside, I was greeted by the symphony of hammers and saws, a testament to progress. Zara was in her element, coordinating schedules and making sure the budget stayed on track. She'd gone from someone obsessed with an external aesthetic to someone determined to build a deeper, lasting beauty, a place of true refuge. Meanwhile, more residents arrived, and the house was filled with the gentle chaos of second chances. Jackie started a small knitting circle, teaching others to crochet scarves and blankets that we then sold at local markets to raise extra funds. Nora organized morning walks around the neighborhood, forging friendships with people who'd once eyed us with suspicion. Slowly, we became not just tolerated, but welcomed by many. Of course, not everyone was won over. The stern-faced HOA representative still sniffed around, but now she had fewer reasons to complain. Our property was well maintained, and any negative rumors were overshadowed by the positive buzz in the local press. A short article in the Charleston Daily spotlighted Rose Harbor, praising our efforts and quoting several residents who described it as the family they never had. One day, as the new wing's foundation was being poured, Zara turned to me with a reflective look in her eyes. "Have you thought about what's next for you personally?" Mom, you've been working nonstop. Do you see yourself staying here for the rest of your life? The question caught me off guard. I paused, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. I never thought I'd have the luxury to dream that far ahead, I admitted. But now I'm beginning to think I could. I love seeing these women find hope. I love being part of something that matters. Maybe I'll keep running this place as long as I can. Zara nodded slowly. I think you should. This is your calling. And for the first time in years, I believed that Amara Watson, had found my place in the world. Weeks later, with the additional wing nearly complete, we decided to hold a Founders Night, a small gathering to celebrate everyone who made Rose Harbor a reality. The entire house buzzed with preparation. Nora baked a mountain of biscuits. Bernice decorated the living room with hand-sewn banners, and Jackie perfected a new punch recipe that might have contained a hint of rum. That evening, the house lit up like a beacon. Residents, volunteers, neighbors, and donors all mingled in the foyer and hallways. Carlene arrived in a stylish blouse, and her short pixie cut elegantly teased, while Naomi wore a floral maxi dress that matched her vibrant personality. Zara, with her now slightly longer hair pinned back, donned a simple but elegant sundress. I opted for a casual blouse and slacks, plain but comfortable, midway through the celebration. Zara gently tapped a spoon against a glass. Could I have everyone's attention? She called out. The room hushed. Standing at the center, she took a breath, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on me. I want to thank all of you for being here, for believing in Rose Harbor. But mostly, I want to thank one person, my mother, Amara, whose kindness and perseverance built not just this house, but everything I am. Her voice trembled. I said something awful to her not too long ago, words I can't take back. But every single day since she has shown me what real beauty looks like, strength, compassion, and forgiveness, this place is a testament to that. My chest tightened, tears welling in my eyes. The crowd glanced from Zara to me, some wiping away tears of their own. I stepped forward, voice quavering. Thank you, Zara, and to everyone here. You're the reason Rose Harbor is alive. Each of you brings a story, a heart, a set of hands ready to help. This home was born from heartbreak, but it's grown into hope. The applause that followed wasn't raucous, but warm and sustaining, like the comfort of a well-worn blanket. As I looked around at the faces glowing in the soft light, I realized that in giving others a chance to heal, I had found my own healing too. A few nights later, once the hustle of Founders Night had faded, I found myself alone on the wraparound porch, the wooden swing gently swaying beneath me. The moon was high, casting a silvery glow over the lawn and the newly finished wing at the side of the house. This place, once just a battleground for a mother and daughter, was now a sanctuary for countless souls seeking solace. I closed my eyes, letting the chirping crickets lull me into reflection. In my mind, I traced back to the moment Zara called me ugly. It still stung when I remembered how her eyes had held no warmth, how the perfect lines of her home had shut me out. But that old pain was drowned out by something more powerful, the love we rediscovered. We had both changed her by learning true empathy, and me by finding that my worth was never tied to anyone's approval. I thought about Connor, too, and the unexpected inheritance that spurred so much growth. Sometimes we never get to tie our loose ends neatly, but in life's messy threads, we find new patterns of redemption and hope. He might be gone, but in a way, he contributed to our second chances. Zara appeared in the doorway, a soft smile on her lips. She joined me on the swing, our shoulders touching. For a moment, we just listened to the hush of the night. Then she leaned her head against my shoulder like she did as a young girl seeking comfort after a bad dream. Mom, she whispered, do you ever think about what life would be like if none of this happened? I wrapped an arm around her. Sometimes, but if it hadn't, we wouldn't have all these wonderful people here or each other in the way we do now. We'd still be living separate lives. Mine lonely, yours hollow. She nodded thoughtfully, and I could feel her breath catch. I don't regret it anymore, she said. Neither did I, because in the end, we found something more powerful than vengeance or pride, something that turned heartbreak into purpose and cruelty into compassion. And as the soft glow of the porch light illuminated our tired faces, I realized we were no longer just mother and daughter, but partners in this grand, messy, beautiful act of building a home where everyone belonged. Thank you so much for joining us for this unforgettable tale of heartache, forgiveness, and new beginnings on her Fireside Stories. Margaret and Zara's emotional journey reminds us that even the deepest wounds can heal, and sometimes redemption appears when we least expect it. Did the story resonate with you? I'd love to hear your reflections. Drop your thoughts in the comments below and share your own experiences or insights on family forgiveness and second chances. Don't forget to mention where you're watching from. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. If you loved tonight's story and want more content like this, please hit subscribe and click the bell icon so you'll never miss another fireside moment. Until next time, take care, stay warm, and keep your hearts open.